On August 19th, 2016, 26-year-old Kennedy Ife began to exhibit peculiar behaviours and made crude and disturbing remarks. He became aggressive towards his family. He bit his father, threatened self-harm by wanting to cut off his own penis, and claimed a snake or python lived inside him. His parents, Kenneth, 64, and Josephine, 56, along with his siblings Roy, 33, Harry, 32, Colin, 26, Samuel, 20, and Daniel, 20, strongly believed that he needed home intervention, not medical intervention. This is the case of Kennedy Ife, a modern-day exorcism. I need to stress this. This one is a disturbing one, and I mean no harm or ill will to the Kennedy family, and this also may be sensitive to view. The case of Kennedy Ife has sparked important conversations about the intersection of religion, mental health, and the law. While the belief in possession by demons or evil spirits is common in many religious traditions, the practice of exorcism is not without its controversy. In fact, exorcism can be a dangerous and traumatic experience for those who undergo it. Kennedy Ife was a young man from Enfield in the UK. A 26-year-old man considered fun-loving, enjoyed going to work, and spending time with his large family. Kennedy got struck down by a sore throat while going about his normal life. This began a turn of events that eventually led to the loss of Kennedy's life. When the family called for the doctor, they couldn't find anything strange or unusual. Very shortly after the doctor visited, the throat pain persisted, and Kennedy began displaying uncharacteristic mood swings. These sudden outbursts would come against his family and friends, seemingly out of nowhere. This transitioned into other ailments, including breathing problems and stomach pains. Then his day-to-day life began deteriorating. His attendance at his IT consultant job began falling to the wayside. In addition to not turning up to work, he was also not eating much and started to rapidly lose weight. His family started taking notice of this extreme behaviour that was very unlike what they considered normal Kennedy. His father, Kenneth, thought that due to his sore throat, he was suffering from lack of sleep, causing Kennedy to become sleep deprived and irritable, and that was just seeping into his daily life. Everything started to escalate once Kennedy's father told his family that he just believed Kennedy needed more sleep. While sitting in his room, hunched over, his siblings reported to their parents that they had found Kennedy quietly talking to himself, sometimes even arguing with himself. What was even worse than that was there were multiple voices. Some were in Kennedy's voice, some were clearly Kennedy putting on what seemed to be a different voice, but others they couldn't explain. Concern turned into worry and fearful pretty quickly. Kennedy began cursing at his parents, something that he never did, and would have tantrums where he would break items in the house or throw his food on the floor. The 26-year-old Kennedy began displaying emotional episodes he had never shown before, and his swings and aggression had only just begun. When trying to figure out what was wrong and how they could help, Kennedy told his family that he could hear voices in his head, and that there was a python slithering around inside of him. At one point, one of Kennedy's brothers was standing in the hallway in his boxer briefs. He seemed to have a dazed, faraway look on his face, and his hand was inside his boxers. When his brother asked if he was okay, he started mumbling incoherently and then said he wanted to cut off his own penis. He then started mentioning the mark of the beast, or 666. He broke down, started crying, and prayed for God to forgive him. On another day, Kennedy was laying in his bed when he told one of his brothers that there was a seed in his stomach, which was growing into a writhing evil snake inside his body. Shortly after these encounters, the family knew that something had to be done. They had already tried the doctor route with his throat, so instead the family decided to turn to their local minister. So they headed to their local minister, a man named Andrew. He was a church volunteer at Jesus Sanctuary Ministries. He prayed for Kennedy along with two other ministers named Brother Pete and Brother Amika. A quote from Andrew on his initial reaction to everything with Kennedy was, "When I arrived at church, I was informed that we had been instructed to attend the address of Sister Joe, to pray for Kennedy. Together we arrived at Sister Joe's house at 10:59 p.m. Colin opened the door. We were ushered into the living room. I saw Kennedy lying down. He had a mobile phone in his hand. He seemed to be typing something on his phone, texting someone. I said hi. He said hi. He looked me directly in the eyes. He looked unwell. He looked tired. As we began praying, Kennedy's father walked into the room with a man and a woman from a different church. I believed he was a pastor, but I had never seen him before. Sister Joe asked if we could let the man take over. He prayed for God to keep Kennedy and heal him. I felt quite angry that we had been instructed to come. After they left, we continued to sit and pray. Kennedy sat up when we went to leave. He looked to me like he had a fever. He was not as bright as he seemed when I met him in the past. Despite hours of prayer and multiple sessions, it seemed to have little to no impact on Kennedy's state. His anger and violence only increased. This was the final straw, especially for Kenneth. He believed his son was in fact possessed by a demon. Since the doctor did no good, and taking him to the local minister seemed futile, Kenneth took matters into his own hands. His cure for Kennedy was restraint and constant prayer. Kennedy's brother Colin quotes, "It's clear that the thing was not in him, and what we believed was a demon because it was not natural. It was clearly trying to kill him. We had to restrain him for himself. It was clear if we didn't restrain him, he could have tried to harm people in our family." Things were bad in the family home, and Kennedy was getting worse. They overpowered Kennedy and placed him on his bed. They used cable ties, rope, and handcuffed. He yelled and screamed, he barked and growled like an animal. And for 3 entire days, 72 hours, this is how Kennedy lived his life. The family spent hours reciting prayers over his body, hoping this makeshift exorcism would cure him of his demonic entity inside him. Slowly, Kennedy's strength left him, little by little. He became delirious and incredibly dehydrated. His breathing problems also intensified. On the 3rd day, Kennedy experienced a seizure, and his family called the paramedics. Naturally, they were a little shocked by what they saw, with Kennedy being completely tied up. But they was even more shocked by the circumstances of the situation. Kennedy was lying there dead, and his family was trying to resuscitate him by chanting and saying prayers over his body. They were singing, and Colin had his arms out in front of him and screaming, "Kennedy, I command you to rise in the name of Jesus." The paramedics took swift action and released Kennedy's body from the restraints. It was discovered that cardiac arrest was the official cause of death. The tragedy of Kennedy's death raises important questions about the legal system's ability to deal with cases involving religious beliefs and practices. While freedom of religion is protected by the law, the line between religious expression and criminal behaviour can be difficult to navigate. In some cases, religious beliefs may be used to justify abusive or neglectful behaviour, and it is up to the legal system to determine whether such behaviour should be excused on the basis of religious freedom. In Kennedy's case, his family members were initially charged with manslaughter, false imprisonment, and causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable adult. However, after a 4-day jury deliberation, all 7 family members were cleared of charges. Some have criticised the verdict as a failure of the legal system to protect vulnerable individuals from abuse and neglect. This was a big case here in the UK, and a scary one at that. This was one of those I thought was only around in the 70s or 80s. But to know these things continue to happen, exorcisms, it is a cause for fear. If you know of any more recent cases or phenomena, then please let me know down in the comments. What do you think of Kennedy's story? Please be respectful in the comments, don't take this too far. But for now, you don't have to be afraid of what's behind.